Thought I'd do a quick vid today talking through the process we went through to decide what sort of oven splashback to buy and how I got around to installing it. And whilst today's video involved installing a splashback behind a range cooker, which makes the process a little bit more complicated because you have to think about how best to support it and what sort of dimensions to make it to. The process is pretty much the same whether you do something like this or whether you're installing one behind an integrated cooker. So stay tuned either way. Why put a splashback in the first place? Well, we painted these walls with a contract matte emulsion. Because we'd installed a breathable wall insulation system, there's a link to that video coming up on screen now. And the problem with this is it's not very durable. So any grease on that wall, wipe it away and quickly we'll be wiping away the paint. Now we could have painted the wall in, say, a vinyl emulsion, but even then a bit of grease from the oven and it's quickly going to get stained. Some people have said, why didn't you take the quartz splashback that you've got here all the way across and even sort of further up? Well, quartz is a very difficult surface to clean, again, if you start peppering it with grease. Peppering it with grease? So the first question, and this involved a lot of head scratching, was exactly what sort of splashback we should put in here. Because you've got a few options. In our old kitchen, we had this stainless steel splashback, which we were very happy with. But the trouble is it did require a lot of maintenance, really hard basically to keep clean. And I've also read on some websites that certain other metals, like for example aluminium composites, can warp at high temperatures if they're within 150 millimeters of the source of heat on the oven top. I think with induction hobs like ours it goes down to 50 millimeters, but it's still something you need to think about. We never had any problems with our steel, although looking at this image I reckon the heat source was probably a good 200 mil or more away. But in our case, the main issue was aesthetics. Do you go black to match the oven and the hob? I did seriously consider that, but then I thought, ooh, that could look quite oppressive. Other option would be to go stainless steel like we did before. Well, we just talked about that. And actually, looking at it now, it does give you those slight commercial kitchen vibes. And if you want to be really funky, you could go with mirror glass. But I don't think it would have worked here because I think you need an enclosed space, like for example, a chimney breast, for the sort of illusion of space it creates to be most effective. So we did decide to turn to glass, partly because it can withstand much higher temperatures, even though as here we've got an induction hob, so it shouldn't be so much of an issue. And after a bit more head scratching, we decided to try and blend this glass with the wall, which was painted little green slate lime. So I thought, let's get a glass splashback painted to that bespoke colour. Did a bit of Googling, found a couple of companies that seemed to be able to do this service, and the first one that came back and confirmed this I decided to go along with. Not very scientific. I ordered a 6mm glass with easy clean coating and a tube of adhesive. I should probably have requested a sample in that little green colour, which would have cost £20 but would have been a smart investment. What about the dimensions? Well, I went 1000mm wide, exactly the same as the oven. That's the easy bit. And when the quartz went in, I got the fitters to leave a gap for it. And more by luck than judgment, that gap allows a crucial 2mm expansion either side. Who knew that glass needed that? The drop is a bit more tricky. I made it 900mm, which is 75mm below the countertop. More on the reasons for that in a minute. And why would I say sampling is such a good idea? Well, after buying 20 litres of the wrong paint before we finally settled upon this colour, I just assumed that because we knew the colour, everything that we got in that colour would be perfect. The problem is the slate lime is a perfect match on the back of this glass splashback, but when it comes through the glass, you've got a slightly green tint. I don't know whether you can see it here in the image. We thought about whether to send it back, but in the end we decided we actually quite liked it. Luckily, having a green tint is sort of in the same colourway as the units. And so it was on to the installation. Last time round I had that stainless steel splashback resting on 2 brass panhead screws, which worked really well. I'm not even sure I used any adhesive for it. This time round the glass was a lot heavier, but I decided to use the same technique. Again, if you're just having your splashback resting on the countertop, you haven't got to worry about this. I knew there was a stud in the middle from when I had to channel some new wiring for the under cabinet lights, and I used my super strong magnet to latch onto a screw in it to accurately locate it. This is absolutely the best technique for finding studs. I'll post a link to where you can buy one in the description. So this is a screw that's going in the middle, and this is a bit of rubber sleeving for an electrical socket. I cut a little bit off. The idea is that this is going to protect the mirror glass from the screw. PZ3 screw bit, and you know it's a PZ3, you know it's posi because they have these little cuts on the screw head. Phillips bits, PH, don't have that. There we go. I haven't got any other studs in this wall, so these two I'm relying on a plasterboard fixing. And I turn to an old favourite, the metal wall anchor. Perfect with their panhead bolts that can be left sticking out as they don't rely on compression into the plasterboard. I found the cheaper setting tools can fail, but this Fisher has been brilliant over the years. With a 9mm hole drilled in the plasterboard, it's in with the wall anchor. And then the setting tool locks the anchor tight into the plasterboard. For more info on how these work, check out my vid on screen now. Same treatment for the wall anchor bits. And we were ready for the splashback. Check my splashback now to see if it fits before we glue it in place. Suitable without clanking around going on. Pretty pleased with that because that's given me a 2mm expansion gap at the top just below the oven hood. I think I've absolutely nailed that, folks. A few things to say about the silicone. Firstly, it's translucent, that's pretty obvious. Secondly, it's low modulus. That it means it's more flexible, which I think is a good thing when you've got glass which has expansion and contraction when it gets hot. And thirdly, it is neutral cure. Now that means when it goes off, it's not emitting acid. I think it emits sort of alcohol and non-toxic vapor. And this is obviously very important when you've got a sensitive surface like a paint, as opposed to say an acetoxy silicone, which would be the opposite and could erode the paint on the back of the glass. There are so many different schools of thought on how much silicone to use and where to put it. Some people say you put it in lines, other people say you put it in rings, and most commonly you see it being put in blobs. The trouble is, I don't know whether I'm going to keep this splashback forever. But what happens in a few years' time if I want to change it for something else? I've got mechanically fixings underneath, so really it just needs to be sat in place. And I suppose withstand a little bit of cleaning from the front. So I decided to go down the blob route, and I don't know why I was talking about removing it, because with the amount of silicone I've put on, this isn't going anywhere. With those screws to rest it on, the process of putting the splashback in place and pressing it to the wall was pretty effortless. Press it on. I suspect that'll stay where it is now, but what I have done is got myself some cloth tape, and I'm just as a precaution, because I've got to go out soon, put a bit of this up in the corners, just in case for whatever reason it decides to go walkies. That is a fit of scientific term. So what I've done here, I did this last time, it worked pretty well. My range cooker comes to the top of the counter here. And by having the bottom of the splashback 75mm below the countertop, it means that when you push the range cooker back in, you can't see the bottom of the splashback. Perfect. Job done, game over, as my old builder-mate Dodge used to say. Or perhaps not quite, because we've got potentially a bit of siliconing to do. If you're putting your splashback on a countertop with an integrated oven hob, you're going to probably want to put a bead of silicone between the glass and the surface. And for that, get yourself one of these profiling kits. I've done loads of videos on siliconing. I'll put a link up on screen here and one in the description below the vid. The other school of thought is you put silicone down the edge between the glass and the wall. I have decided not to do that because I think it looks much cleaner not to have that gap full of silicone that you can't then paint. So that's it for today. I hope you found that useful. I've got some really cool videos coming up, so stay tuned to the channel. Next weekend will be my garden lighting video, come rain, wind or shine. I know I've been promising that for a while. And after that, I've got the garden furniture build, which is now finished, and I'm really pleased with it. Don't forget, everything I've talked about today will be in the description below the vid, and the company I bought this splashback from have, at the moment at least, put an offer code there for you. I've obviously paid full price for this and I'm not benefiting from that, but it's there for your use. They're a really good company to deal with and great customer service. And finally, if you're new to my channel, it means so much to me to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here, and don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all my future uploads. See you soon.